Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from in the world today. And a very warm welcome to our latest FIDIC webinar, where we will be launching FIDIC's latest State of the World report that is entitled Nurturing Tomorrow's Infrastructure Workforce, Capacity Building and Upskilling, Closing the Sustainability Skills Gap. My name is James Mwangi, and I am the CEO of Nairobi-based consultancy firm called Kurrent Technologies Ltd, and also a vice president of FIDIC, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Our webinar today is launching an important report. It's part of FIDIC's State of the World series of reports, which deal with some of the key global issues facing the engineering, construction, and infrastructure sector. This particular report explores skills, upskilling, and capacity building in the infrastructure sector and focuses on some of the present skills, shortages, and gaps our industry faces, while also addressing the question of which skills are indispensable in 5, 10, and 15 years' time. The report also will highlight and address one of the most important challenges for infrastructure professionals, and that is the need to build a workforce that is not only technically excellent, but also equipped to meet the urgency of sustainability, net zero, and societal imperatives. The report we are launching today identifies critical skills gaps in areas such as renewable energy integration, digital literacy, AI-driven innovation, and sustainable construction practices. As governments and industries alike commit to reducing emissions, the infrastructure workforce must drive to be upskilled to meet the future challenges we face, and then also deliver on climate, emissions, and biodiversity promises. The report includes case studies and examples of where the industry is getting it right that point to workable solutions for the future. It also makes the key point that effective collaboration is key for aligning workforce development with the evolving demands of the infrastructure sector. As a result, FIDIC calls on industry leaders to prioritize partnerships that foster continuous learning and skills development. There are also some key takeaways and recommendations in the report. These include the need to embed sustainability across industry training programs, the need to leverage emerging technologies like AI, fostering cross-sector collaboration, for governments to make policy interventions for continuous learning, and the permanent need for the global infrastructure community to drive change in this area. Our panel of speakers today are here to explain the key issues contained in the report in some depth, outlining the strategies that companies and organizations need to have in place to ensure that they are equipped with the skills and people that they need to succeed. Those speakers include Basma Eissa, Head of Policy, ESG and Sustainability at FIDIC, who wrote the report, Malani, CEO of MPAMOT, Shoroke Zedan, CEO of Tahil for VET Skills Excellence, Artur Brito, Development Manager for TPF Engenharia and a member of FIDIC Future Leaders Advisory Council, Maia Chowdhury, Senior Architect at AECOM, and Micheala Chan, Climate Engineer at Arcadis. The report we are launching today is an important one for our industry for many reasons, and we will hear our speakers speak about those reasons shortly. Above all, though, if the industry embraces and leverages the report's recommendations, then we believe it will not only meet the challenges of sustainability, but also position It served as a leader in driving meaningful environmental and social change. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speakers at today's event. It is Basma Eissa, Head of Policy, ESG, and Sustainability at FIDIC, who wrote the report. Basma will give summary of the report and its findings, and then we will hear from our speakers. Once we have heard from all our speakers, I'll ask them some questions that I have conveniently prepared, but please do also ask any questions that you might have from the audience by putting them in the chat box, and we will get as many of them as we can. Basma, the floor is yours.
Thank you, James, and hello, everyone. I'm happy today to introduce our FIDIC's latest State of the World report, Nurturing Tomorrow's Infrastructure Workforce, Capacity Building, and Closing the Sustainability Skills Gap. This report captures what we at FIDIC see as a crucial moment for our industry, and it's a clear call to action for all stakeholders dedicated to shaping the future of infrastructure. The report goes beyond highlighting challenges. It presents a roadmap for the fundamental shift our industry must embrace. We're no longer just building bridges, roads, and buildings, but we're rather working at the critical intersection of sustainability, technology, and social impact. And today, the infrastructure sector faces a profound responsibility to address some of the world's greatest challenges: climate change, rapid urbanization, resource scarcity. And to meet those demands, we must cultivate a workforce that is not only skilled and adaptable, but also purpose-driven and ready to make a meaningful difference in the world. The report really couldn't be more timely. Our industry has an outsized impact on carbon emissions, and it is marred with a negative reputation in this respect. And as the push toward net zero intensifies, it's clear that infrastructure holds a pivotal role in reducing the global emissions and achieving sustainability goals. And yet, there are substantial gaps in the skills required to meet these goals. Areas like renewable energy integration, digital and data literacy, AI innovation, and sustainable construction are all crucial. But if we don't tackle these gaps immediately, we risk hindering our industry's progress towards meaningful climate, emissions, and biodiversity commitments. And these gaps don't exist just within leadership roles or specialized position. These permeate in every level of the business. And closing them will take decisive, coordinated action, not just within individual companies, but just across the sector as a whole. Within this report, as we identify the challenges and issues, we also precisely offer a concrete, actionable path forward, underscoring the importance of cross-sector collaboration. So it's a solution that doesn't depend on a single organization or a specific industry leader. It calls for a united approach that includes industry leaders, educational institutions, and policymakers. And actually, one of our core recommendations is to create partnerships that promote continuous learning and upskilling across the board. Government support is also incredibly critical. By introducing incentives such as the tax breaks for sustainability-focused training programs, we can encourage companies to invest in developing a workforce ready for tomorrow's challenges. And this isn't just about enhancing individual skill sets. This is about fostering a whole ecosystem where a sustainable infrastructure workforce can grow and thrive. And FIDIC has always been committed to sustainable infrastructure, and this report reaffirms this mission. Through initiatives like the trainings we have from the FIDIC Academy and our events that nurture skilled new generation of engineers, we have events like the Global Infrastructure Conference, our Global Leadership Forum. They all further enrich this effort by uniting international voices to share insights and advance best practices in workforce development. Additionally, FIDIC's frameworks and contract models, including the carbon management framework we're working on at the Global Leadership Forum, the contracts and the net zero clauses right now in progress, they all provide actionable tools for embedding sustainability into every project. And this report is yet another resource, a practical guide full of real-world case studies strategies from both organizations and governments. They are designed to inspire immediate and effective action. So we present through the report examples of what worked, what did not work, and where and why it went wrong. Another key recommendation from the report is that sustainability principles must be embedded across all aspects of workforce development. So sustainability isn't just a box to be checked or ticked. It should be woven into the fabric of every project, from initial design up to the final delivery, ensuring that both environmental and social goals are integral and met. Next, the report highlights the potential of emerging technologies. Tools like AI, digital platforms, automation, they all hold tremendous potential to help meet the sustainability targets. But to unlock those benefits, we must equip our workforce with the skills to harness them and be able to work through them effectively. Regional adaptation is also a major player here. Every region has a unique priorities and challenges, and we're very lucky today to have regional representation among our speakers in the panel. So we can see how these unique opportunities and challenges cannot be a one-size-fits-all. Whether it's Africa's emphasis on energy efficient construction, Asia's focus on sustainable urban growth, or the more developed sustainability path through the Northern Hemisphere, when we share these diverse experiences and tailored strategies globally, we can adapt to varying needs and levels of local development, and then we can accelerate progress that resonates and remains effective and applicable worldwide. So, to attract the talent we need for this journey, we must communicate the purpose behind our work. Infrastructure is no longer just a career path. It's an opportunity to drive real and lasting change. And studies show that 70% of millennials and Gen Z actively seek jobs that contribute to sustainability and positive social impact. And by highlighting this purpose, we can draw in and inspire the next generation of engineers and infrastructure professionals to join us in building a more sustainable world. Our industry stands at a crossroads. The actions we take today to upskill and prepare our workforce will determine our ability to create a sustainable future. And this report offers us the steps to get there, challenging each of us to commit to change, to embrace innovation, and to lead the way in environmental and social transformation. And I would invite everyone to download the report, and I'm sure you will find it insightful. Thank you, and I look forward to the discussion with our esteemed panel of experts. Back to you, James.
Thank you, Basma, and great work on producing an excellent report. Our next speaker is Malani, CEO of MPAMOT, a South Africa-based engineering and development consultancy. Malani, it's over to you.
Thank you, James, for that introduction. And Basma, I just want to say you did an excellent job in preparation of this report, and more importantly, in summarizing exactly the core elements contained in the report. So thanks for that. But I think with regards to my discussion, or rather my comment in terms of the what's been presented in the report, it actually starts with what you finished off with. And that's really about the fact that, you know, I often in my own organization emphasize the fact that we are actually involved in a career with a purpose. And that, I think, ultimately drives what we do on a daily basis as an employee in the built environment space, and as an organization that's actually very focused in terms of what we do in communities, in our countries, and more importantly, how we impact the world at large. So the career with a purpose is what struck me the most in terms of how you've presented it in the report. I think the other very relevant position that you've taken with regards to the report is in the way of presenting case studies. And it comes both from public sector as well as private sector interventions, and in some instances, the collaboration and what this has actually led to. So if one were to look at some of the case studies in the report that have been presented, it's very evident that irrespective of where you're sitting in the world, whether it's in a developing economy or a developed economy, there are certainly a lot of takeaways from studying some of these case studies. It also allows organizations to be able to position themselves more so from probably a maturity model in this journey, and to also possibly identify opportunities that they could actually influence, whether it's public sector or alternatively private sector environments, in terms of how do they actually able to influence, whether it's from a procurement side or alternatively from a implementation side, especially at the early stages of projects. And I think you've emphasized that in your presentation as well, is that if we are to actually get traction in terms of ensuring that we're responsive, that we actually do need to influence in the early stages, in the design and concept stages, to get buy-in in terms of ensuring that we meet some of the criteria. I also am very encouraged by some of the stats that have been presented, because not only does it present how dire this issue in terms of upskilling and capacity building is, but it also provides us with real information in a one-stop shop to be able to convince the powers that be as to what needs to be done, and needs to be done quite urgently. So I think that the report actually conveys that very appropriately. The other point that I would like to make with regards to the report is it also presents an opportunity for developing economies. We have this conversation about leapfrogging, but what does it actually mean from an industry perspective? And it's very closely related to technology. It allows developing economies to be able to be in a position to understand what would be required, and from a responsive position to be able to ensure that we're upskilling in areas that would require us to be able to be in a position to say we are open for business, and we are actually embracing technology that would be relevant and that would be that would be appropriate in terms of what would be required in country. So I like the way that we presented opportunities of collaboration where this has happened. And more importantly, the emphasis that's placed on AI and digital solutions, etc., in the space that we operate. I mean, we cannot necessarily achieve this without the correct infrastructure in place, particularly on the continent, and I'm focusing specifically on the African continent. And unless we have the infrastructure in place, there's many of these technologies that we could not necessarily embrace. So it is critically important that that is seriously looked at in order for us to be able to upscale appropriately to meet the global needs. I also particularly was encouraged by the fact that you emphasized on the localization piece, because whilst we might be solving world problems, I do believe that localization plays a critical role in terms of addressing some of the challenges that we faced with, particularly with developing economies, and one needs to have a fit-for-purpose solution. Often you would find that in developing economies, finance is the biggest driver of whether something is implementable or not, and affordability. And as a result of that, it's imperative that we actually have fit-for-purpose solutions. I think that the collaboration that you've actually alluded to and highlighted in some of the case studies lends itself for excellent opportunities for collaboration, both not just from a skills perspective, but also from a net zero and a carbon trading perspective that we've often alluded to. And how does one actually create opportunities of collaboration that would enhance delivery locally, but also allow for the opportunity of those skills to be portable should it be required. So I'm particularly encouraged by the localization piece and the emphasis on that, because I do think that it encourages partnerships, and it also encourages opportunities for twinning arrangements globally. That is something that would actually address some of the skills shortages that we faced in country. I am going to pause there, James, now at this point, and give for the other speakers an opportunity, and I'm sure, and be prepared for the questions that you will be posing to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Malani, for those excellent insights. Next up, we have Shoroke Zedan, CEO of Tahil for VET Skills Excellence, an organization that ensures that the focus on education and excellent training in the Middle East and North Africa reduces skills mismatches, enhances labor market flexibility, and maintains sustainability. Shoroke, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, James, and good afternoon, everybody. It's such a pleasure for me to be participating in this very, very interesting discussion. I just got back from the annual meetings with the World Bank, and one of the key topics that were being emphasized throughout these meetings is green jobs and the growth opportunities that job generations is being provided or needs to be provided and led by the private sector. I think that the infrastructure sector is a very important sector because it caters to multiple segments of different economies. We have cross-cutting where core competencies are essential, such as understanding what sustainable development is, green skills, and of course, digitalization. And I think that it is quite refreshing to be able to see a report that emphasizes the necessity of the role of the private sector and what the private sector needs to do with regards to the upskilling and reskilling, especially to the workforce. And for Africa and the Middle East, when I refer to the workforce, it is really, really crucial to always integrate vocational training and education. It was also very interesting to see how what are the different strategies or mechanisms that can be set forth with regards to creating new jobs of relevance. And I think this is something that is very important and needs to be led by the private sector through public-private partnerships. And Egypt has already begun something a few years ago through its reform initiatives to be able to address the SDGs and address climate change by encouraging public-private partnerships, whereby there is a lot of industry-led innovation with the private sector in terms of policy development, looking at supporting not only strategies that are apt to implementation on the national level, but also on the regional level as a form of minimizing brain drain and mobility of the workforce to more developed countries. And I think this is something important because it is the private sector that, you know, we can say engineers the whole concept of job growth. And having looked at the best practices that the report highlights, I think is also something that is very interesting and can definitely be aligned with developing countries and new emerging markets, especially across sub-Saharan Africa and Northern Africa, with regards to how we can further our SDG initiatives and climate change perspectives. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Shoroke. We now have Artur Brito, Development Manager at Brazilian-based engineers TPF Engenharia and a member of FIDIC Future Leaders Advisory Council to speak to us. Artur, over to you.
Thank you so much, James, and hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you so much for the invitation, for giving the future leaders a seat at the table. That's very important to us. And after these two great presentations, I'd like to talk a little bit about the strategic approach to upskilling and the future leaders' perspective on that. And also, I'd like to give some Brazilian context at the end with a few barriers that we see here to implementing those solutions here in Brazil. So, starting with these strategies for upskilling itself, I believe the State of the World report brings us a diverse menu, if I can put like this, of strategies to bridge the skill gap in sustainability. And I'll try to focus in a couple of them that we can do internally, especially when we consider interactions between the senior professionals and the future leaders. And I believe the first one and the most obvious is training. Of course, it can be the formal education through external or internal courses, book group study, etc. But we cannot forget what I'm going to call here the informal education. And by that, I mean going to conferences, local events, roundtables, because these kinds of events is where we can exchange with different people and learn from their experiences. We see the different examples that are on the report, and this, I believe, is one of the best ways to learn. A second important initiative is to create projects with universities, NGOs, and other kinds of stakeholders to tackle specific skills that are required to our industry and also develop new technologies. In Brazil, we do not have many examples from the consulting industry itself, but others do that pretty well. And one interesting example from recent years is a partnership between Toyota and University of São Paulo to study hybrid flex cars. So, I mean, this was a revolution a couple of years ago, and are undergoing this study together. And if our industry directly tackles this kind of partnerships, we could not just reduce the gap, but also produce new knowledge that could be feedbacked to our projects. But those two solutions, I would classify them in the category of explicit knowledge, which is the one you can formalize and everything else. But there's the other one, the tacit knowledge, which is much more difficult to manage and cannot be expressed in words. But it's a very important one to be managed by our companies. And this, I believe, could be the leap to reduce the gap in sustainability. And here I would like to put two main actions. And the first one is mentoring. So by putting together senior professionals with the younger ones, it can speed up their learning curve and help the passing of knowledge regarding the sustainable principles and solutions used in our projects. But here, there's an interesting detail that must be considered. It's that these professionals, the younger ones, don't just need to join the project as passive team members, but actively work alongside the senior professionals. Because this way, we can not only learn the solutions and principles itself, but also grasp the reasoning behind them. And that's how great professionals are done. And these are the ones that can deeply tackle the challenges of sustainable infrastructure in the future. And the second approach is a little bit more broader, but I believe it plays a key role in fostering future leaders and young talents by encouraging a culture of controlled risk-taking and experimentation. With this setup, emerging leaders can get hands-on experience with the concepts and their learning through guided mistakes and discussions with the experienced mentors, with the senior professionals. And also this not only leads to new solutions, but also shapes our understanding of the thought behind of the process behind each one of those solutions. And okay, but how the future leaders see this question of the skill gap in the infrastructure, and how can we contribute to reduce it? And I believe 3 points stand out. The first one is that we really want to make the difference. We just need the opportunity. So for those that had the chance to attend the GIC this year on Sunday, we can hear many inspiring stories that show that the young leaders are committed to making the difference in society. And I believe this reflects a generational mindset focused on bringing fresh ideas and creating positive change in our communities and beyond. So you're asking for this chance to contribute, bridging our own sustainability gaps, because we sure do have, but also helping the future generations to do the same. And of course, creating new and innovative knowledge. The second point is that we can support this development of new technologies and close the infrastructure skills gap by being quick learners and being adaptable. So our generation already grew in a time of fast change. When we talk about the younger ones, it's even worse. So I believe this is one strength that we have that lies on adaptability and our ability to face challenges with innovative solutions. And finally, I see that we need to incorporate, and I believe this is probably the most important one, we need to incorporate the sustainable thinking into our company's strategic decision, in our company's business model. So it's more than just a talk. And at this year's FLAC webinar, we discussed this gap between the words and the actions. And I believe closing the skills gap in infrastructure means aligning what we say with what we do, and then transition to concrete actions inside our companies. And I believe that the future leaders can help a lot in doing so. So as I move towards the end of my brief speech here, just to give some context on Brazil, we do have a couple of issues here that constrains us a little bit regarding implementing these solutions, sorry. And the first one is a relative limited interest from the clients in sustainable solutions, which they see as more expensive and with uncertain financial returns. And this reduces opportunities for professional training and also for development of innovative solutions that can benefit both environment and society. And this situation is closely tied to financial constraints that are faced by companies in a relatively unstable economy. This situation has changed a lot in a couple of years, but you never know when the next crisis will come. And the second barrier is the lack of integration between ESG principles and business models, as I have talked a little bit about. And until this integration becomes standard practice in our industry, new sustainable actions are largely driven by client demands and government regulations, which slows down the pace of closing the sustainability skills gap. So just to sum up, if I could leave you here with a message, is that bridging this skills gap in sustainability is possible, especially through collaboration between young professionals and experienced mentors, and that the future leaders are ready for this transition and prepared to make a positive impact in the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Artur. Next, it's my pleasure to call on Maia Chowdhury, Senior Architect at multidisciplinary global consultancy firm AECOM, to speak to us. Maia, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to all the previous speakers. I echo your words and your sentiments. I'm going to talk about two main areas. One is how AECOM is preparing its workforce in sustainability, especially in architectural design alongside of engineering. And secondly, I'm going to talk about the skills that are needed as we are developing green cities in the future. So the first item, how is AECOM preparing its workforce, integrating sustainability into architectural design, urban planning? and so on, particularly in the context of ambitious net zero targets. So I have 6 items that I will highlight here. The first is specialized training programs in carbon modeling within the company as part of the company's proprietary Scope X, that's the proprietary brand name, protocol for designing carbon modeling, designing carbon by reducing the carbon impact of our designs by more than 50% beyond industry norms. I myself have taken on this training as a senior architect, even though some of the modeling skills themselves are executed by junior staff. And I chose to do that so that I could better understand the impacts and the outcomes of the modeling and the design implications of those. The second is creating interdisciplinary project teams. AECOM is an interdisciplinary engineering company, and it forms interdisciplinary teams for projects, such as 2 that I'm working on, the North Shore Wastewater Treatment Plant in British Columbia, where we have architects, engineers, and landscape architects collaborating to ensure that we reach sustainable outcomes. To me, a project like this exemplifies how diverse expertise can come together to create more innovative and environmentally friendly solutions. And this work also involves intern level and co-op level students from neighboring universities who attend multiple levels of meetings, including with clients. Another project that I'm involved with is the Regional District of Nanaimo's Integrated Project Delivery Water Infrastructure Upgrades. And this brings together all stakeholders at the early stages of designing, including client and contractor, to ensure that we have a seamless collaboration in the sustainability goals. The third point I will mention is integrating Indigenous wisdom. Something I'm very proud of within AECOM is that AECOM emphasizes the importance of Indigenous wisdom. On the recent Truth and Reconciliation Day in Canada, we had a junior staff member lead an office-wide training session in which she was sharing her personal experience as an Indigenous person in engineering, and she moderated a discussion on AECOM's impact on Indigenous communities. And this session included participants from all levels, from junior to senior staff, which I think also highlights the importance of giving junior staff more opportunities to speak at higher levels. And we also have a North American Indigenous Affairs Director within AECOM who coordinates this work for us at an international level. The fourth is something that's already been mentioned, and this is mentoring. Through mentorship programs, AECOM encourages junior staff to learn, but also share new technical expertise that they have learned in university with senior leaders. Personally, I've mentored many young professionals in architecture across the US and Canada, both within and outside of AECOM, helping them navigate their careers and developing their skills. This mentorship has been absolutely instrumental in fostering a supportive and inclusive environment. And this means that junior staff feel more empowered to contribute to the generation of ideas. I think that emphasizing sustainability skills and being vocal about using the sustainability skills is a key part of mentorship. The fifth and related item is what I would call leveraging multi-generational expertise, a little bit like mentoring. I believe AECOM values the very diverse perspectives of a multi-generational workforce. AECOM over time has grown through a series of mergers and acquisitions, and as a result, it has inherited and invested in senior staff who come from other companies, and they bring a wealth of industry experience within AECOM and from other companies. And we also have a mobile workforce. Recently, I transferred from AECOM US to AECOM Canada, and I have been able to share my own learnings and my own experiences as a senior architect on both sides of the border, which has enriched my team's collective knowledge and approach to sustainable design. And we definitely encourage this, this sharing across borders. This is another opportunity within this, this forum today. The sixth item I will mention in relation to how AECOM is preparing its workforce is in terms of continuous learning opportunities. AECOM supports continual professional development and has an initiative that is called AECOM University, which is not a university, but it is an internal continuing education database of courses. Staff can access AECOM University at any time for both required and optional trainings, including a wide variety of sustainability related courses. And this access ensures that staff are staying current with the latest advancements in sustainable design and urban planning. Just one example recently from myself. I recently attended a panel discussion on coastal resiliency while I was physically in Philadelphia. It was hosted by colleagues in California, and I have brought those insights and connections with me in my current role in Vancouver. So all of these items that I've mentioned together form, I think, a solid backbone in how AECOM is preparing its workforce. The second item I wanted to talk about is, with the focus on green cities, the skills that are necessary for architects and designers going forward to support the work. The first that I will mention is more of a technical practice area, and that is focusing on the idea of the circular economy. So in this, I like building reuse, adaptive reuse, and historic restoration as being key in designing green cities. And I think these are often overlooked in favor of newer and higher efficiency projects. For me, I think the circular economy teaches that we must reuse and improve as much building stock as possible, with new construction high efficiency buildings being a later choice in the list of our options. We can bring high efficiency to older buildings, and that is a large part of the work that I'm involved with as an architect at AECOM. And I think when we do this, we create more robust cities based on these historically layered civic structures that have been brought to modern and contemporary needs. This relates very clearly to low carbon design, because retaining existing building material is one of the best low carbon design solutions that a city can make. A second skill I would emphasize is understanding atmospheric science. You don't have to be the atmospheric scientist yourself, but having someone on your team, I think, is essential. AECOM was involved in many different climate resiliency reviews of federal historic buildings in Canada. I'm involved with those, and they are collaborations between atmospheric scientists, the architectural team, and civil and structural engineers, which I think is yet another example that demonstrates the importance of interdisciplinary expertise as we're addressing climate impacts. And as others have mentioned, it's often a federal government requirement or guideline that sets the tone and creates the guidelines for these projects. Another skill is focusing on coastal and estuarine or river resiliency. And again, one does not have to be that expert, but it's important to have someone on your team who is that expert. So AECOM employs coastal scientists, planners, engineers, modelers, and they together will work with our clients to understand the dynamics of complex coastal and river systems, which helps to enhance coastal resiliency. So we have a number of tools that we use, including modeling around tidal hydrodynamics, storm surge, shoreline change, looking at coastal erosion hazards, and so on. There's a few generally applicable skills, I think, that help in the development of green cities. And again, these have been mentioned before. One is having a digital and technological proficiency. I think architects and designers have to be adapting a huge range of software, especially for building information modeling, or BIM, and geographic information systems, or GIS, as well as other digital platforms. And these help to enhance accuracy and help to generate a higher level of quality control. The last two items I'll mention relate and kind of tie all of this together. One is giving opportunities for leadership in sustainability. And this is really the next step after mentorship. And it means that we are training architects, designers, and engineers to be leaders in sustainability. We have within the company leadership development programs that train people how to be not just effective sustainable designers, but effective sustainable leaders. And this integrates a very rigorous quality assurance and quality control process, QA/QC, that's adhered to all the way through a project from beginning to end. That is an essential component of leadership and sustainability, in my view. And then the last thing I will mention is, this is going to sound so basic, but it's, I think, the most important, and that's having strong communication skills. It's one thing to be able to design and engineer a solution, but if you can't communicate about it, it's not going to go very far. I think these need to be written skills, spoken skills, and visual graphic communication skills. This doesn't mean you have to be a graphic designer, but being a little bit fluid and flexible with multiple modes of communication is very good. I know that some people find it very easy to write. Some people find it very easy to speak in public. And for some people, it's terrifying. And especially if someone is not speaking in their mother tongue in their workplace, that can be a little bit daunting. So I would just encourage everyone to continue to practice at every opportunity. And my final word of confidence boosting for everyone is, I don't think people are concerned if you are learning how to communicate. I think they're more concerned if you're not trying. So I encourage you to try and to be brave in your sustainability communication. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Maia. A very good way to end. I know public speaking and communication is never easy for some, but for others, very, very easy. So thank you very much. Our final speaker, Micheala Chan, climate engineer at the Global Design and Consultancy Organization, Arcadis. Micheala, you are very welcome.
Thank you, James, and thanks to all the speakers for raising such good points so that I don't also have to raise them and can talk about other things. So I'm speaking on behalf of a working group from the World Federation of Engineering Organizations. So for those of you who don't know, WFEO was founded in 1968 under UNESCO, and it's the world's largest global engineering organization, bringing together over 100 national engineering institutions and representing more than 13 million engineers. And the group I'm on sits under the Young Engineers Future Leaders Committee, and we're a working group on climate action. So we came together in 2021 ahead of the COP26 in Glasgow. And our mission is to enable young engineers to collaborate globally and contribute meaningfully to climate action. And we aim to do this through several different kind of strands of work. The first is representing the voice of young engineers on major international and national platforms. So that includes the climate COPs, as I mentioned just now, as well as creating a platform for global collaboration between young engineers, and finally advocating for and building capacity of young engineers for climate action, including engineering practice and policy. So some of the things that we've done to date include producing a joint statement of international youth organizations for COP26, which provided 12 overarching climate policy recommendations covering areas from climate mitigation to adaptation and resilience and inclusive action. And this was endorsed by several highly influential international organizations, including YOUNGO, which is the youth arm of the UNFCCC. And we've also participated in capacity building ahead of COP27, including running a series of webinars bringing together speakers from across not just engineering, but the policy and climate finance and biodiversity spaces to talk about what COPs mean for engineers and young professionals and how we can maximize our impact in the climate space. But acknowledging that most people who are young professionals in the built environment space don't come from a policy background and don't necessarily have the foundations of understanding in climate policy, we think that upskilling is very, very important. So one of the major campaigns that we're currently running is called Engineering Change. And I'd like to just take a minute or two just to tell you a bit more about that. So the Engineering Change campaign is a campaign that we launched at COP28 in Dubai last year. And it's a global initiative that we're working on with the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure to empower young engineers to spearhead sustainable development within their own communities and their own workplaces. It started with a global consultation that we did with young engineers and engineering managers from across all the major continents. I think about 80% of the respondents were young engineers and the other 20 were managers. And through that, we came up with some key insights that have kind of signposted the way forward since then. So the first was that young engineers consider the challenges to implementing sustainable development to be more significant compared to managers. So there's a big discrepancy between how managers find that they're upskilling compared to how young engineers are actually experiencing that when attempting to implement the things that they're learning. So that talks about needing a greater level of support and also more inclusive and inclusive and enabling environment within workplaces. The second was that young engineers perceive additional training and upskilling to be significantly beneficial for them in applying sustainable development practices, but tailored approaches are required. So exactly what you've all been saying about needing things to be locally adaptable, while also keeping in mind the bigger picture. And lastly, that we've confirmed that additional skills in sustainable development yield both personal and professional benefits for young engineers. And that's from the perspective of the young engineers and also from managers. So generally, I think it's very clear that sustainable development is one of those key things that we need to upskill young professionals in. And you can read our report online by searching Engineering Change. But something we're working on at the moment is a roadmap of training resources for nature-based solutions. And we'll be also creating further roadmaps around other topics like advocacy and storytelling, kind of help young professionals who want access to these resources to know kind of where to look and to be able to interact more freely with these organizations working in the space. And another thing that we're launching soon is to try and collect stories from young professionals working in the built environment who are working in implementing sustainable development principles, kind of create little testimonials of how we can all do better. Because I think one of the things that we can all do is share our stories and help to inspire more people. And I think that's probably, I'll leave it on that. But if anyone wants to get more involved in the campaign, please do get in touch.
Thank you very much, Micheala, for this insights. Now we're going to get into a round of questions, and I see some questions on the chat. Let me ask the participants or attendees to also share more questions. We are doing very well on time, so we've got ample time to answer questions, and in so doing, I guess everybody walks out with a good understanding on the topic. So I'll do a first round of questions for the speakers. I'll start with Malani. Malani, given your experience as a leader in the South African infrastructure sector, how do you see capacity building evolving in the context of South Africa's unique development challenges, such as rapid urbanization and climate resilience?
Thanks, James. I think before I answer that question, I just want to put things into a bit of context, because down in South Africa, I think one cannot afford to ignore some of the legacy issues, particularly the impact of colonization, our independence, our democracy, and our post-democracy transition that's happened over the last 30 years. So it's imperative that in that context, the consideration of rapid urbanization and the impact that it has allowed us as professionals in this particular environment to actually evolve and take into cognizance some of the legacy issues and to be adaptable in terms of some of the solutions that we've been providing from an infrastructure perspective. That then has led to, the capacity building initiative that we speak about is actually two-pronged in approach, because we find in South Africa that we have, whilst one of my previous panelists has alluded to the brain drain, that's very prevalent, particularly in South Africa, and more so because of some of the international accords that are in place, like, for example, the Washington Accord and the Dublin Accord. So as fast as we are trying to train our professionals to be adaptable to some of the legacy issues that we faced with and to be actually transforming that quite quickly, we find we're losing them to first world economies. So we need to be conscious of that. But when I speak about the two-pronged approach, I'm also referring to the fact that whilst there might be a brain drain from private sector organizations within the country, we also have a situation of capacity constraints within our public sector domain. So typically, if we are actually functioning predominantly in the public sector domain, we have a challenge as we see that brain drain. So our client is not necessarily as informed as we would like them to be. So with regards to the challenges we face from an urbanization perspective, it's equally important that we capacitate our clients both from a public sector as well as attempt to retain the skills that we are developing locally. Because, when we talk about localization, it does require understanding the dynamics against which we've transitioned and to be able to solve those problems. On the climate resilience front, I do believe that we've made some really interesting advancements in that, because there are certainly municipalities in South Africa that have adopted and have a climate strategy in place, seriously considering what sort of infrastructure, not only from a climate resilience perspective, but also from a climate adaptation perspective, that needs to be in place. So our professionals locally are certainly being responsive to that. I think the challenge, though, is that in this early stages of design and conceptualizing, we actually still find it a challenge in terms of convincing our clients in terms of the value add that would be brought to the table in those early stages of project implementation. That is often a challenge, and it's also very closely related to our procurement regime and how our services are actually procured. That needs to be looked at in a lot more detail, and I think that some of the case studies that have been presented would actually add value to that locally. And I strongly believe that, from a capacity building initiative, the collaborations that are initiated locally, we find that a lot of our tertiary institutions are actually taking industry recommendations in terms of areas that they can potentially be upskilling quite seriously. So there's a lot of partnerships that have been forged between private sector and our tertiary institutions, so that private sector can input into these conversations in terms of the skills that would be required to be responsive to some of the challenges we are faced with.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Malani. Certainly resonates very much with the developing world. Retention is key. Issues to do with the procurement strategies are also very, very key. So points there. Shoroke, next question goes to you. How do you see the role of vocational education evolving to meet growing demand for green skills in infrastructure projects in North Africa and the Middle East, particularly with the region's focus on renewable energy and sustainable urban planning?
Thank you very much, James, for this question. Definitely, vocational education and training is something that is imperative, especially for the Middle East and for the Africa region. We have the majority of youth tending to enter the workforce through vocational education and training. So it is very, very important that curriculums integrate not only the technical competencies that are required by the private sector in order to generate employability and increase the job market to fit the surplus of young people entering this particular job market. And the infrastructure sector is definitely a priority sector, but also to integrate competencies that are of relevance to greening and relevance to digital transformation. And these are curriculums that are of great importance, not just to the infrastructure sector, but all the sectors as well. These are cross-cutting skills that are necessary and are needed for a variety of sectors, even as you introduce health and safety procedures and health and safety measures that are a requirement in the vocational sector.
Thank you very much, Shoroke. Vocational training in some of the developing country has probably not grown at the rate at which the infrastructure development agenda of a country is. And therefore, I'm seeing at some point we had more tertiary or university prioritization, but I think countries now are changing those policies. So again, blending with your thoughts, I think that would make tremendous, it will give tremendous value. So thank you very much. So Artur, we come to you from Brazil. So given Brazil's significant investments in sustainable infrastructure, strategies are being implemented to ensure the workforce is equipped with the necessary skills to meet net zero targets.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, James, for the question. I believe here I would like to answer in a more broad sense, a national perspective. Today we do have a lot of actions running around here, but as Malani said, I believe I should give some context before answering this question. After 2013, 2014, we did have a lot of changes in our country, and due to that, the sustainability agenda was quite put aside. So a couple of years now, it is resurfacing and gaining actually international view inside UN, with Europe and everything else. So now we have 3 or 4 main actions that are being done. And the first one, I believe, is a change inside universities, especially in the engineering universities, with educational programs that bring sustainable actions and sustainable courses to the graduation itself. So it's something we do see in graduation, also in master's degrees and PhDs, and this can make a change in the whole formation of the professional. A second action, as I could say, is that the government is trying to reach the small, medium and small companies. The big companies usually do have their own ESG or sustainable programs, and since the SMEs, as it's called, small and medium enterprises, the SMEs, they have a lot of difficulties to implement those programs, especially when you talk in terms of financing. So the government has made some moves regarding this with a program called Brasil Mais. It's like Brazil Plus in Portuguese, that it supports these small and medium companies to adopt digital transformation and sustainability practices by providing training and try to increase the environmental efficiency. Also, I believe that there's a joint movement between companies and government, which is what we call the new economy. And it is basically introducing sustainable principles and programs inside our companies, but with the social and environmental regard, especially towards Amazon. So in the north region of Brazil, we do have a lot of initiatives that tackle this issue and try to create through sustainable actions. The companies try to create revenue and benefits for the local communities. And just to close this loop, since we have governmental action going on, we also do have actions going on within the private companies, since some of them, especially the big ones, are bringing this movement forward, is putting deadlines and targets to becoming net zero or reducing their emissions, for example. So I believe that in the last couple of years, the ecosystem has aligned a little bit itself with governmental actions and private sector actions that I believe, if they continue as such, can bring a lot of benefits for Brazil's sustainability in the future, but also with the regard that we are still an emerging country. So this pressure for growing slows down our pace in making this environmental net zero transition, as we see in many other emerging countries around the world.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much, Artur. We come to you, Maia. With focus on green cities, what specific skills do you think are most critical for architects and designers in the future? And how can these be developed within the existing workforce?
Thank you, James, for that question. I think if I pull together many of the threads about what I spoke of previously and what other people have mentioned in their questions and answers, I would say it is one thing, being open to interdisciplinary thinking. So you might be trained in one area, but there is so much to be learned from listening to someone across the table who's trained in a different area from you, because this is where technology transfer will lead to innovative ideas and solutions being sparked in a collaborative discussion. And this is certainly going to be emphasized by actions like mentorship and leadership training and improving communication skills, but really focusing on the interdisciplinary richness that comes from the opportunity of being involved in infrastructure engineering. So for me as an architect, it's wonderfully enriching for me to be involved in these interdisciplinary conversations. And I think for the engineering colleagues with whom I work, it's equally enriching to learn from my architectural and interiors perspective. We all are dealing with a similar set of issues, but we're trained to look for solutions through different pathways. And we often spark innovation when we all sit down at the table and share our perspectives. So that would be the number one thing from my view.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So again, very powerful in terms of collaboration. And then we cannot forget the young engineers. So Micheala, this is for you. In your experience, what are the key barriers that young engineers face when they are trying to engage in climate policy making? And what strategies can organizations like World Federation of Engineering Organizations use to overcome these obstacles and amplify the voices of future leaders?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think there's different levels of barriers that young engineers can face, and probably the most difficult one is the structural barriers of these big, like the climate policy making space is quite a big space that is quite structured already, and like I want to say structured too many times, but it structurally excludes certain groups, right? And so you find that there aren't enough spaces for young people or other marginalized communities to contribute. And unfortunately, that's not something that young engineers themselves can do anything about. But I think it's a good opportunity for organizations like WFIO and FIDIC to use their platforms to support young engineers, as FIDIC is doing now, and giving spaces for speakers at events like this. From the young engineers' perspective, I think building your own capacity, learning how to speak the language of the system. So when you read about climate policy making, I think for outsiders, there's a lot of jargon and it's quite technical language, but learning how to break that down and how to communicate that in accessible ways to other young professionals, and kind of making it more accessible for your peers and having that peer mentoring is very important as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So this time I want to turn to questions from our attendees. And the speakers, you're free to raise your hand. I'll try and probably point some of them to some of you, but we can have answers from more than one speaker. So the first one here from, I'll not try and pronounce this, Owen or something like that. How can we facilitate engineers up to upscaling their green skills on a regular basis? Operation of global and area regional specific trainings, materials, curriculum, impacting training, bringing improvements in the ongoing curriculum in engineering education at undergraduate level to realign it with modern needs. So this is something to do with upscaling skills at a graduate level. And specifically here, I'm talking about green skills. Is there somebody who would like to take this, or can I ask maybe Shoroke, would you like to try it?
Yeah.
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 And then we'll have Maia. Okay.
I think that this falls into two directions. The first direction is that we need to be able to have established assessment centers, and it's through these assessment centers that certain standards and competencies are set up to fulfill the different job levels for each profession. And it's through that one can easily upskill and reskill regardless of whether or not they have a job or it is company specific. And of course, the second is through online platforms. There are a lot of educational institutions that are offering certifications that are specific to the required skills for sustainable development and climate change. So I hope this helps.
Thank you very much. Maia, you also had your hand up.
Yeah, I was actually going to provide a very similar answer. I think if we're talking about shifting from undergraduate to graduate level expertise and wanting to find it outside of a graduate school, which is maybe part of the question, I think a lot of information can be gathered through MOOC courses, which stands for Massive Open Online Courses. And those are usually free, sometimes part of a certificate program, offered by universities around the world, usually on demand, so you can do them in your own time zone. And I think when you're looking at it from the perspective of the employer, they're more interested to know that you've studied the content and you know how to apply it than you've done it at a particular university with a particular qualification. It's really all about the application of information you've learned. So for example, if someone's going to a job interview and they've done, say, 3 MOOC courses, but they're not part of a certificate program, they could make a prototype project for themselves. They could draw it in 2D, in 3D. They could share it in an interview and say, this is how I have applied this learning. That's going to be very valuable to an employer. An employer is going to be looking to see, how will this person apply skills to solve my client's problems? So that's what I would suggest. You can also get very specific in terms of your own discipline and search for keywords that relate to a topic of your own focus. I think there's a lot to be gained from pursuing higher education in these fields, but it's certainly not the only way. Application is really key. And communication about the application.
And communication. Thank you, thank you. So as I comment here, Artur, somebody saying that the mentoring element is really important. We also shouldn't underestimate that mentors can learn a lot from mentees, particularly relating to sustainability. We need to tap into that enthusiasm and passion. So that's a comment. So we are saying reverse mentoring. And I say for a person of older generation like myself, there's a lot I learn from the young people. I don't learn as fast enough, but I try. And then there's another comment here about, is there any room for engineers to have psychological therapy once every few months to keep their minds motivated to learn new skills? This may benefit senior engineers. So interesting comment there. I don't know whether I'll take this as another very good comment. There's also a comment here, a suggestion that we must promote green building and green infrastructure concepts to save water and energy. I couldn't agree more. But there's one here for you, Malani. In developing countries, what are some of the key barriers to implementing sustainable practices in infrastructure? And after Malani, Artur, could you also take a crack at it, please? So start with you, Malani.
Thanks, James. I think that's a very interesting question, and I can sum it up in one word: funding.
Okay.
I think maybe 2 words: funding and the procurement regime. I think it's imperative that in developing countries, one of the challenges we have is that whilst the intent is there in terms of providing sustainable practices, the need is more around how do you actually fulfill the infrastructure requirements of the majority of the population when you have challenges in terms of basic services, etc. So the other point that I want to also raise is that the awareness creation around sustainable practices requires a lot more intervention. So the issues related to, stakeholder engagements, etc., and awareness creation around that in order to have communities absorb sustainable practices is a lot more intense than you would in a developed economy. So the education around that is critically important. As I indicated, funding. And then and when I talk about funding, and I'm talking about the funding and the investment upfront for built environment professionals to actually be focusing a lot more in the early stages of project initiation and development in order to ensure sustainable practices are implemented in projects, but are afforded the latitude of being able to do that very effectively. So I think that sums it up from my side. I think if we had that, there would be a bigger uptake.
Yeah, I mean,
Excellent,
I think Malani summed up perfectly the the scenario. In Brazil, it's quite the same. And just to build a little bit upon that, what we're trying to do around here is try to create sustainable solutions that are less costly, so since we don't have the money to invest on the ideal solution, we try to find a way to create a good impact on the environment with low-cost solutions. So I think this financial constraint, despite being a barrier, also creates an opportunity for innovation and new technologies to be created. So, but I have nothing more to add to Malani's speech. She summed up perfectly.
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, you're correct. Sometimes the key thing is to make progress. It could be small progress, but one thing I've seen is that as people embrace the need to enhance sustainability, as they see value, as they understand it, and as the younger people grow, then I think we see the rate at which there's appreciation also grow. So the key thing is not to fail to try and progress. I think that's what I can say. So totally agree. So let's go to now the connection between the young and old. How do you improve connection between young professionals? I'm going to tie that with another question also here. Connecting youths with senior engineering professionals can bring impact in addressing competence gaps. However, injection of innovation should create a forum that brings diverse perspectives. And they're asking, how can FIDIC develop such a ground to embark a journey? I guess what we're saying is that in this sustainability talk, the connection between the young people and the older people, remembering that it's not just top down, but it's also bottom up. And I want to ask perhaps Micheala to give this a crack at it. And then Maia, if you could also contribute, please.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the mentoring point. Again, I think senior engineers, senior professionals who've been in the industry longer, it would be great if you actively make time to share your knowledge and to also create opportunities. So there's something separate from mentorship called what's it called? Sponsorship. So that is kind of a more active way of promoting opportunities for younger professionals. And I think it's important that we also start talking about sponsorship and creating spaces, not just telling you how to fill spaces that might not exist. And yeah, also to point out again the benefits of mentorship for mentors as well. I think you always learn both ways when you have any relationship with anyone, because no one is exactly the same. So I think talking less about age and experience, but just more about the different perspectives that we have is important too.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Maia?
Hi, thank you. I thought that I might answer that question by just giving an example of the ways that I mentor. So and what I learned from who I am mentoring. So I will often meet with someone junior, either in person or on video, and they might bring questions to me or problems, workplace situations, goals, and then I might help them brainstorm about it. Or we might just start with what's inspiring you today and have a conversation about what is interesting about this problem. What might some possible solutions be for this set of problems? Or it might be me taking the lead and saying, this is something I'm working on, and these are ways that people at different levels in the organization might get involved with this set of issues. And that leads to one aspect of mentoring that we haven't really mentioned, and that is shadowing someone in the workplace. So one way that junior and senior people can integrate in the workplace is simply to have someone junior shadow a senior member of a project and observe. Sometimes there's a task for that junior person to do. Sometimes it might be taking notes. Sometimes it might be helping to take measurements, something like that, maybe doing some site photography. And it could be something more or less involved with a client. But the most important thing is being in the room, being on the work site, being in the field, having a seat at the table, and also allowing that junior person to feel comfortable to ask questions, not necessarily ask questions in front of a client, maybe save the questions for after the client meeting, but to have that free-flowing dialogue. So shadowing for me was an important part of me becoming an architect, but it's also something important that I think I can offer and that others can offer as a senior member of a project to junior staff.
Very much. As I have quite a number of comments, I'll just speak one or two, and then we can go into closing where I would like the speakers to do a closing sentence. There's a comment here: FIDIC contracts are adopted by the major banks like World Bank and ADB. Is it possible to include mandatory sustainable clauses in procurement and contract documents to support upskilling and sustainability at the government levels? How can this be encouraged across government projects? So I'd like to say, yes, FIDIC contracts are constantly being improved, and sustainability is certainly something that is being embedded in these contracts. And what I can say is that the multilateral development banks that finance these projects that we have MOUs with for use of FIDIC contracts, certainly we see many of them requiring compliance with the contract clauses within this contract. So what I can say is that I think we're going to see more and more government realizing that it is not an option, it is a requirement, especially if they are relying for external funding for projects. Another small comment I would like to take here: some of the high-end technological skills are not fully embraced by public, government, and market despite their needs in the face of the current global crisis. Only a few private companies can invest in these skills, e.g. AECOM. How can individuals develop the skill? I would like to say here that we have seen governments embracing policies, developing policies towards addressing climate change and sustainability. And I think nothing accelerates uptake like legislation. And so what we are saying is that we ought to be at the table where these policies are being made, so that we have a level playing field in parties being required to comply with the requirements and to give these what I would call priority. I see a couple of other questions, but unfortunately we are just coming to the top of the hour. I would like to give our speakers each a minute to make a closing comment. And let me start with Basma, who developed this wonderful report. A closing comment, please.
My closing comment would be to invite everyone to download the report, and not just to read it, but hopefully to implement it. And it would be great if we get some feedback. So we have lots of roadmap points that we ask people to follow. So if you have followed any of it and have any comments, whether negative or positive, it would be great to get some feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And then we will have Malani.
I think all I want to stress on is the importance of global collaborative partnerships in order for us to achieve this. We can't solve these problems on our own, and it's imperative that we encourage and we support such global collaboration and partnerships. So I urge you to actually look at that in a lot more detail, because localization is the essence of the day, and if we're to solve this with high-end technology, we do need global collaborations and partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Shoroke?
I think that the main remark is that there are a lot of best practices that exist out there across many, many nations. And the most important aspect would be to ensure that these best practices are being implemented within the current context of every country. rather than just looking at it from, copying it as is, because sometimes that doesn't really work, especially with the different educational systems.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Artur, one closing remark.
Yeah, I'll advocate for the future leaders. So give us a seat at the table. We're ready to help in this transition, in bridging the skills gap. And I'll steal Micheala's wording here that was, let's talk about less about age and talk more about working together. And I feel that we do have a path to this transition.
Excellent, excellent. Aya?
I would just say, I think that engineering and architecture, as we know, are very physical ways to manifest a vision. And I think that in this panel today, we've really shown that around the world, there are ways to take tangible steps to manifest a sustainable vision. So I would encourage everyone to continue focusing on that. How do we want to manifest this vision, and how do we want to communicate it across the generations?
Excellent. Thank you very much. And then we'll, lastly but not least, Micheala.
Yeah, I think I would say that whoever you are, whatever your experience, if you have some kind of power, use that power well and use it to empower others.
Thank you very much. Very, very well said. So we have had, what an excellent webinar we have had today. I want to thank all our speakers for sharing their insights and their knowledge, and thanks also to you, our audience, for being involved and for asking such interesting questions and also sharing interesting comments. I think it's clear that together we must take decisive steps to build a workforce that is not only capable of delivering sustainable projects, but is also poised to lead the way in transforming the infrastructure landscape. I hope that this report serves as both a guide and an inspiration for our sector. It's really a roadmap for action, collaboration, and growth. The infrastructure workforce of tomorrow will not only build the structures that support our economies, it will also shape the world we leave behind for future generations. It is our responsibility to make sure that they are prepared for the task. Please do keep an eye on the FIDIC website for details of our forthcoming webinars and conferences. You can see some of the screen now, and we hope to see you in another event very soon. Thank you all again, and goodbye from me.
Thank you.
Thank you.